This is the Sourced Podcast, where cold mornings, screaming bull elk, and bent rods turn into legends told. Hosted by Nate Zielinski and brought to you by Jiffy Ice Fishing, we go beyond tags and trophies, into the grind, the heartbreak, and the moments that keep us coming back for more. If it bugles, if it bites, if it lives wild, it's Sourced. Lock in.
Welcome to the Source Podcast. I'm your host, Nate Zielinski. This podcast and every podcast officially brought to you by Jiffy Ice Fishing. Again, we cannot say enough about the amazing folks at Jiffy Ice Fishing, what they've done, and more so, we talk about it every week, the transition from Jiffy Ice Drills into Jiffy Ice Fishing. Literally, if it's ice fishing, Jiffy is the name that you have to remember. Make sure you check it out. But today's podcast, we've got an amazing guest in studio. We're going to talk about all the things that, honestly, I'm kind of uncomfortable with. So it's going to be awesome. We're going to be talking about kayak fishing, bass fishing, fancy baits, current trends, and staying up with the times, as I tend to get slightly more old school in my fishing. So we're excited about that. I got Trev Stuckey in studio. Trev, how you doing today?
Doing good, Nate. How are you, buddy?
Man, I'm excited that you're here. So you and I met in the hunting world, right? And this is like a lot of my relationships. Half of my hardcore fishing buddies, all we talk about and all we do together is hunting. You and I met in the hunting world, and we're talking fishing, things like that. But when it comes to anglers, right? I know anglers across the country. You're probably one of the more hardcore anglers that I know. If there's a question, right? People ask me all the time. I'll be on a guide trip or I'll be at a seminar, and they're like, what about this? And I am embarrassed to be like, I don't know what they're even talking about. I don't know what that bait is. I don't know what that technique is. I call you and I'm like, hey, what are they even talking about? Like, because I just don't follow it, right? I'm in it, but I wouldn't say that I follow it as much. You're in it, man. So sure. I'm excited to have you here.
Yeah,
I'm excited to be here. You're a part of all of it. So first and foremost, you live in the kayak world, right? Yep. When you say kayak fishing, this is probably my favorite thing. You have outside anglers, people that don't fish a lot, right? And you say kayak, and you have like the blow-up kayak or the hard molded kayak, and you got your paddle and you go and do it, right? That is not what we're talking about today. We are talking about an obsession of a sport that is taken so extreme, it's just crazy.
Right.
I mean, like, your kayak is literally my tournament-ready walleye boat in a smaller version.
Pretty much.
So I want you to start off just to let people know kind of what we're talking about when we talk about kayak, just to lay the scene. Like, what is your rig like?
Well, I actually fish out of what's called a Hobie Pro Angler 360 XR.
Okay.
It's a 13.8 foot long. It's a plastic kayak.
Okay.
However, I do have it equipped with a motor. Okay. Newport Vessels NK300 allows me to go a whopping 6 miles an hour, which is cool, but does help you cover ground. It also is a pedal-driven kayak, so you're not paddling in the sense, you're actually pedaling with pedals with your feet. It also has the capability to move forward, backwards, side to side, diagonal, which also helps when you're running bank or fishing different structures, whatnot. But it is considered a high-end kayak.
Yeah.
It runs bone dry around $6,000 before electronics or anything added to it. I'm actually in my fourth Hobie kayak since I've started competitive kayak fishing. Yeah. I just progressed and have gotten a new one every couple years. This year, with the XR, I'm also running a Lowrance HDS live setup with forward-facing sonar, active target 2. To go along with, I can carry an average of anywhere from 10 to 12 rods or more any given time. You don't like to carry that many. You hope your bite's dialed in. Yeah. But even more if you want. I've seen guys carry up to 16 rods or more. So it's just kind of what you're comfortable with there. But no, it's insured. I also just recently purchased a custom trailer for traveling. So yeah, there's quite a bit to
that's it. Like you say, kayak fishing, and I mean, it's a lifestyle more than it is when you talk about a device, right? I mean, you were fishing in a boat, just a smaller version of that. But yeah, I mean, you were in a tournament recently. I was on the water that day, and we saw it, and like, I mean, some guys are running 1 graph. Some guys are running 2-3 graphs. Yes. I mean, multiple, live systems. And I mean, like you said, 15 rods and tackle, and then you're standing on them. And I mean, there's so much to it.
Very stable.
It's crazy. And I know the hardcore kayak guys, they know what we're talking about. Other people might be like, what on earth? But I love it. And I will say that the passion amongst the kayak anglers is much like you. Why I wanted to have you on here today. You're eating it up. You're on it on all levels, and it just tends to be like a more hardcore angler. I mean, you look at our tournaments. I have a tournament series, in Colorado here. It's like a Wednesday night type deal, and I mean the kayak guys are as competitive, if not more competitive, than our hardcore tournament bass anglers.
Absolutely,
because they're into it more.
Absolutely.
I mean,
I actually, what year was that? Was that 2020? Might have been 2020 or 21.
Yep.
I won your catch rate AOI out of my kayak for bass. Was received, a little bit different from the boat guys. Some guys, they don't care for the kayaks being in their way, but for the most part, guys are pretty cool about sharing water and stuff with you. But no, very competitive. And with that being said, I think I'm into my around 13th or 14th year now of competitive fishing, and every year you're continuing to see it grow and grow.
Absolutely.
The camaraderie is just crazy, not only just in our state, but when we travel out of state to our tournaments, our national tournaments, everybody gets along so well. They're willing to do anything for anybody on and off the water. So it's pretty cool to see where it's come and how it continues to grow.
Now, okay, so here's the big question that I have first and foremost. When you start, right, especially in that, and I think you see a lot of anglers get into the kayak world. Maybe it's a money thing, right? Hey, I can't afford a tournament boat, but I can afford a tournament kayak. So I think you see that. Or vehicles. I know a lot of guys that are like, hey, I don't have a vehicle that can tow a boat, but I can do the kayak. So I see a lot of the start of that. But now where they're at, you're at the value price-wise of small boats and stuff like that. Why a kayak versus a boat where you're at? Once you're at the level of like, you're traveling around the country fishing tournaments, what makes you want to stay in a kayak versus ever crossing over to a boat?
Personally, for me, I love how close it keeps me to the water and on the water. Nothing against the boat side. What actually steered me away from the boat side here in Colorado is just all the rules and regulations that come with the boats. Now that I've added a motor on, I now fall into the category where with the ANS inspections and whatnot. However, when we go out of state or we go pretty much anywhere, I can take that kayak, throw it in the back of my truck, go up, drop it off on any shoreline, launch it anywhere I want, and take off and have everything right there, the capabilities, not all the capabilities you have on your boat, but pretty close to where I can go out and get a good day on the water with everything I need. But it goes back to, it feels a little more personal in the kayak on the water. And that's probably my number one is if I had to say anything, is getting comfortable fishing out of a kayak is number one. If you're curious about wanting to do this, get a cheap kayak, a Pelican for $500 or something from Bass Pro, and get on the water and just get comfortable trying to catch a fish out of a kayak. Once you do that, then you can progress and start thinking if it's something for you to start spending money and get crazy like we do. But once I went from the shore to a belly boat and then from a belly boat to a kayak, I just knew that was going to be my place just because of how personal it is on the water and whatnot. So I would say that's the reason I continue to stay. Plus, now I've grown into being very competitive against the field of anglers that are also in kayaks now. So it drives me every year to want to go, stay after these guys, and gals. We have a female, Leslie Ali. She's a 2-time state champion here in Colorado. So I don't want to just say guys, it's gals also. But it's been pretty cool.
Absolutely. And that's where it's so foreign to me. I mean, right, my tournament walleye boat, it's a walleye boat to set aside from a bass boat. Like, it's a huge boat, right? I'm running like a 22-footer, 2110. And, right, like, I almost fall off of it, right? It's just one of those deals. Like, I'm a big clunky guy. We're running camera gear, but everybody's like, man, this is a huge boat. I'm like, I don't know. feels pretty, like to me, it's not a big boat. Like you threw me in a kayak, like I'm going to be the dude swimming, right? Just because I'm so used to big boats and that kind of thing. That's where, like for me as an outsider, I look at it and I'm like, man, why not just transfer to boat? But I also understand that side of like, you guys, you're quiet, you're getting into other country. Like it's a lifestyle and it's different. You know what I mean? It's essentially, I compared it the other day when I was talking to somebody, it's bow hunting to rifle hunting. And they were like, what? And I'm like, I don't know. To me, that's like what it is. Like they're intimate with the water. They're like learning things. They're doing different things. I'm like, their access is different. I'm like, there's a lot of opportunities that exist for them and not.
Very true.
And for a while there, it was, you were lacking technology. You were lacking the ability to fish bigger water, to stand up. But now, I mean, like these bigger, like a 14-foot kayak, you have all the graphs, you have all the stuff, you have, everything that we have. And I mean, you go through some pretty gnarly water.
Absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely. Yeah, I've been high centered on trees and stuff, where I've had to have somebody knock me off to get from being stuck. But one thing being said that you hit on there that I've noticed big time is we can't cover as much water as quickly as you do in a boat. And what that forces you to do is slow down and really pick your areas apart. And I've seen it, and I've actually done it myself, and I've seen other kayak anglers where we actually have fished behind boaters quite often, and we're picking off fish because I've noticed a lot of times the boat guys, they fish fast.
Power fish,
They want to get to cover as many areas as possible, and they're not as quiet as us, as you hit on. And a lot of times we can come up back in areas where boats have hit and kind of clean up the scraps, basically, because we can slow down and really pick areas apart. It forces you to fish slower, which I do like that too. You might be hitting the same areas as all these other, and there are a lot of community holes and whatnot, but you'll see a lot of times our bags, our limits that we're catching are every bit as good, and sometimes and a lot of times better than what you're seeing in the boat side. It's pretty cool.
It is super cool, and I agree. You're definitely not spooking fish. I mean, just it all matters. I mean, even just the noise. Not even like, I mean, I think people think motor noise and boat size, but like when we're on our boat, we're stepping around, we're clanking around. Like the quiet, you tend, whether you're standing or sitting in the kayak, you have less movement.
Exactly.
I mean, so you're definitely not making the noise. It's where me, I hear it all the time. I'll step down off my boat and I'll watch fish on my live leave. I'm like, oh, geez, I stepped down a little too hard there. So you just do that, and then let alone the profile, you just tend to slink along in the kayak as you're less all aspects of it tend to be a little more stealthy.
On the expenditure side, yes, I put custom flooring in my kayak to noise, to help with the noise elimination there too. So yeah, it's just another thing you can add on.
Die-hard person. All right, so you have an electric motor on it. Does that replace the pedals, or is that on top of the pedals?
It's actually on top of the pedals. I actually will leave my pedals in the kayak because once I get to an area and I want to really break it down, I'll shut the motor off, and then I can slowly and easily work my way around bank and stuff just by using my pedals and being very quiet, very silent. Plus, if there is ever a problem with the motor and I'm stuck, I have a way to still get back to the ramp if I need to. So it's also a peace of mind of having those in there for that too. So both at the same time.
Is there anchoring on that? Like obviously, my anchor mode on my motors, I can anchor my electric. Like, is it? Walk me through that.
I have two different kayaks with two different motors on them. So one kayak, has spot lock and I can anchor, but my other one does not. But I do keep an anchor with me if I need to drop a physical anchor. I can drop off. Don't use it too often, but it's there if you need it. I
love it. All right, so that's who we're talking to. That gives you a little insight on like the kayak world and the attention to detail, which I love. I want to hear more about some of this stuff as we kind of continue on, but I want to jump into the trends right before we start. Right, you just fished a tournament with some stuff, so Right. As a guide, I tend to get into the nature, not on the tournament side of my life, not on the content side of my life, but on the guide side of my life, right? So I started guiding. We all know my story when I was super young. As a guide, we try to catch the most amount of fish with the least amount of money, right? The guide side is a business, right? So you don't want to buy excess bait. You don't want to spend the biggest amount of money on bait. You have to have what works because you have to produce fish. So there's a fine line there. But like when I pike fish, right? We run big swim baits, but I'm running affordable swim baits, things like that. I know you and I have fished together, and you're like, what about this? And I'm like, what? That looks really fancy. I'm like, dude, that's like a $15 bait. And you're laughing at my $15 bait. And I'm like, I spent $14.99 on that. Like, that's a big investment for me as a guide. Just so everybody knows, I try to have a $10 minimum, which is getting harder to do nowadays. Like a decade ago, when I had my $10 cap, I was like, I can get almost every bait I need for my $10. Now, a lot of my baits are pushing it, which is kind of crazy. But your swim baits, right? Walk me through some of that kind of stuff right now, because you have a collection on a wall. Like, people collect cars, people collect firearms, coins. Chris, what cards?
Hockey cards.
You like hockey cards, right? Walk me through some of your swim baits.
Yeah, swim baits. Well, that's a rabbit hole in itself. I actually got into collecting swim baits before I started fishing them.
Okay.
Just quite a few years ago now, I had a friend that introduced me to some swim baits, and I just loved the garage built aspect behind a lot of the swim bait companies or guys that make them here in the country. Yeah. So that kind of started me out. So I would purchase a $35 to $50 bait, and I would be so afraid to even tie it on that I would hang it on the wall and just look at it. Fast forward now, it's completely gone out of control. I see a bait from a maker that I like, I will do anything I can to try to get it. It's not only just a piece of equipment that I could use, it's also a piece of art to me.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
It's not uncommon, and a lot of people know this.
You got to say it. I want to hear all about it. It's
not uncommon for me to drop $500 to $800 on a swim bait. $1,000. Yes, I have.
On a single swim bait.
Yeah, it's bad.
I mean, he's got these like customs one-offs of like, famous designers. And this is funny because he'll say names. He's like, I got one from so-and-so. And I'm like, dude, I live in the fishing world and I have no idea who that is. Because he's more into it than me.
Yeah.
It is. Now, those baits, when you get up into that price point, you're not fishing your pike lakes with that. Yeah, you're not. So some of those will never hit water. And like you said, they're a one-off. They will never hit water. Some people know of some of the baits I have. I'm constantly getting asked if I want to sell stuff. I never sell them, those kind of baits. But no, some of the baits companies that are getting more common now that you might start hearing about is, for instance, KGB or Clutch. Some of these little bit more known swim bait companies are producing swim baits at somewhat of an affordable price that you can still tournament fish with.
What's that price?
I would say
somewhat affordable.
It's not uncommon that I'll take 3 to 4 swim baits to a tournament with me in that $100 to $150 price range. Some of them are floaters, thank God. So if they were to break off, I could get down in my underwear and go after them. Some of them, however, are not. And no, you want to really be careful. You have to have the right gear if you're going to throw that stuff. It doesn't just. It boils down to the right rod, the right reel, the right line, your conditions. Our tournament last week had one tied on in the morning. I chose not to throw it because my guides were freezing up and whatnot. You might have a chance of snapping one off. But not uncommon in tournaments for me to take baits in that $100 to $150 range. But yeah, you have to watch what bodies of water you're fishing too.
Right.
But no, I could easily send a few kids through college probably with what's hanging on that wall now.
What's your most expensive or most valuable swim bait that you own right now?
They're kind of probably like trading cards. You'll see prices come up and down. And really it'll boil down to how much somebody's willing to pay and how much they want it. But I do have baits in the $1,200 to $1,300 range or more. I have a rod that was custom built that I had offered $2,000 for. I didn't pay for that rod. I actually won that rod. It was one-off custom built. So I do have a $2,000 plus rod on the wall that doesn't get any use either, you know, because I'm afraid of it. But no, there's baits there that get pretty expensive. Yeah.
They're kind of like art pieces.
I mean, that's just what it is. You know?
I actually just got back from Hawaii, and we go there all the time, and I always stop in this shop, and I buy myself a Mark White custom lure. And there's this guy he lives on Oahu, I think, but he makes these ceramic lures, and he paints them up beautifully. Oh, nice. And they're like $20 a pop, you know, and people do fish with them, and they catch a lot of fish. But for me, it's like a memory of that specific trip. So I'll pick out like a certain one, and then I hang it in a case. So I'm sure for a lot of these, that is probably the case for you.
Yes.
But a curious question would be like for the normal guy, right? Like, let's say I hop into a shop and I'm seeing on the wall $20 to $50, you know, glide bait, swim bait, whatever. What is maybe for those $150 baits? What are you getting by buying into that echelon of price for a swim bait? Like, what are the things that you think they do better, I guess?
One thing I love about custom made baits is not one is alike. Okay. They all have their own unique characteristics. Sometimes you will get a custom made garage built, you know, bait that does not swim good, and you will have to tweak it a little bit, whether you have to sand a little off an edge or you have to do whatnot. But the action, sometimes the realistic paint jobs you're seeing now, they're just unmatched against any kind of commercial bot. Now, Berkeley and some other brands, they are producing some decent size glide baits and stuff that's working pretty good. But I just like the custom, the each one has their own characteristics, each one swims their own way, might have their own sound. That just is the awesome part of just each one being done handmade like that.
I mean, that's it. It's like custom tied flies or something, you know, that just, there's just that individuality.
Some companies are known for having their particular swim to their baits too. Like I was saying, like KGB and Clutch, for instance, are putting out baits that are more for tournament use and easier to control with your rods and easier to manipulate and get to do what you want to do. That's the biggest thing about throwing these big baits is getting comfortable with how they swim and how you fish them. A lot of guys, they see more followers you always see than commit on those big baits. But what happens a lot of time is guys are not familiar enough with that bait to get that fish to commit fully. And that's where it goes back to just getting yourself a bait that you want to stay comfortable with. A lot of times I will stick with the same 3 tournament style baits because I know those are how those will produce, rather than grabbing one off the shelf I might not have fished as much just because it looks like the forage I'm going to fish or whatnot. If I'm not comfortable with that bait enough, I won't tie it on. But going back to how cool each individual bait holds its own characteristics, you will find that you have that one that will swim so good compared to the rest that you'll favor that one, just probably like a fly.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, there's no doubt. And I think, I had a live feed deal with this big lake trout thing about 2 weeks ago. We were talking about that, how in a pressured situation, right? When you're targeting these giant 30, 40-year-old lake trout, my goal, everybody's like, what's your favorite bait? And as we were having this discussion, the end of the goal topic was like, I have to have something the fish haven't seen, right? When I am talking about 30, 40-year-old fish that get hit every day, they've seen every manufactured bait, like my trick to catching them is being something different. It doesn't really, for the Lakers, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't have to be nice. It's just different. You know what I mean? But when you're talking some of these bass waters, right? Now with Fish Brain and social and everything, there's not a lot of secrets, right? So everything's been out there. Most of our fish have been seen, and they've been presented to. You know what I mean? And a lot of times it takes a very specialized thing that is different than the norm.
Absolutely.
A different, and especially on the commercial side of things, they all have the same frequency of a noise or a same decimal of a noise, whatever those fish interpret it. And sometimes sometimes just being different can be a huge distraction point that can commit that fish.
Absolutely. I'll try to be quick with this story. It's actually something very special that happened to me early this year fishing. Early in the year in Colorado, what I try to do before the tournament season is I try to hit certain special places of water that I go to that I know hold trophy fish, and I try to use that little window, early pre-spawn time, to try to catch the biggest bass I can catch of the whole year. And it's been very successful over the years that I will get the biggest fish I catch of the year, usually in this stretch. And this year, I believe that was the middle of March, towards the end of March, I'd have to go back and look at the exact date. I was fishing an area where I knew some of the biggest bass in Colorado live. I've seen them before. I've actually caught big ones out of this place before. Going back to what you said, showing fish something they've never seen before. I had seen 3 fish on my graph, and I knew that they were holding towards the bottom. I threw a big glide bait out, a rainbow trout glide bait. I went over the top of those fish and I brought all 3 of them out of that hole and raised them close to the top of the surface, but none of them would commit to it. But I visually seen those fish there and I knew they were there. So what I did is I actually left and I went around and tried to catch them from a different angle, grabbed a different bait, an actually smaller bait, a Japan imported bait that was actually, it was an expensive vibrating jig. Okay. Threw it in there. It has a slow fall. I watched the bait go down there. I know they've never seen that bait before. Winded up hooking one of the fish out of the group. I thought it was a carp at first. A few minutes.
Always a good sign.
Started pulling my yak around. Well, then I could feel it starting to want to come to the surface. And when it did, I seen the head break and I about lost it. I seen it was a largemouth bass, the biggest I had ever seen in person. Netted that fish, and that fish went 10 pounds, 6 ounces. To my knowledge, in the years I've been fishing in Colorado, I don't know of too many fish that have ever went over 10 pounds for largemouth.
I mean, and people listen to this all over the country, but we're not a largemouth state. Definitely not a 10-pound fish largemouth state.
I traveled to Texas all over trying to chase a fish of this size, and to be able to hook this fish in Colorado, I've chased a fish of this magnitude for a long time now. A lot of us close guys knew these fish are there, but to be lucky enough to actually finally get one on a bait I had never thrown before, going back on a bait I know they had never seen that bait before, it winded up paying off with the fish of a lifetime.
That's it.
And if that burned my luck out for the rest of the year fishing, I will take it, because that day will never be duplicated in Colorado for me again. And very special, not only just for me, but to be able to share that with all my close all my close angler buddies that know what kind of fish that is for Colorado. So I already got the form ordered. We're going to be doing a replica on that one. It was also really cool to just see what potential Colorado could really do if given the chance. So very special. So, but yes, going back.
I think that's it. I mean, there's a lot of times where that's all it takes is just a different bait. You know what I mean? And you're seeing stuff across the board. I mean, and this is the next topic that I want to talk about was tournament fishing, right? And we're talking boats. This is not just kayak. We're just talking, bass tournaments. You look at some of the craziest things that these guys are throwing now, and I mean, I would say for the bulk of the time, most of the time, we're trying to mimic something, right? Hey, we're doing this because it replicates the sound a crawdad makes, or a visual, or hey, we're using a glide bait because they're eating a big minnow, whatever. There's some stuff now that we're throwing out there. I'm like, what does that supposed to replicate, right?
The dice, the urchin baits.
The urchin bait. Walk me through an urchin bait. Like, what is that?
Nobody really can tell you what exactly it's
Chris, can you pull up an urchin bait?
To mimic?
Yeah, I'll pull it up.
People that are watching on video need to see what an urchin bait is.
But fish go absolutely crazy for it. Now, 2 years ago, it was the dice baits. The small, look like fuzzy dice is what a lot of them
I don't
are
even know.
called.
I've never seen a dice bait.
So the fuzzy dice was a good bait and still continues to be good for a drop shot or something. But this year, the craze are the urchin baits, the koikis, the crazy looking. Yeah, I mean, they're just.
All right,
they're
can people
just
see
nuts.
that now, Chris?
Yeah.
Right,
the hide up koiki.
You
You can't even get that bait right now. It's so sought after. It's rigged. Everybody has different ways to rig this thing.
So is there a hook in it, or it's just a piece of rubber?
Some guys do put a hook in there. Some guys will wacky rig it and put a weight in it, put a pagoda nail weight in there to get it to drop. But yeah, this new bait craze for this thing is just wild. But it goes back to these fish have never seen anything like this. And there's tournament, elite tournament anglers that are dominating tournaments on this bait right now.
That's it.
Yeah.
You hear about it all the time, and I'm just like, what? I bet a Laker would eat that thing.
I bet you they would. Yeah, I bet you they would.
But no, I mean that's it. And that's the
so
thing
that
we're talking
koiki
about.
right there. I mean, you're talking guys giving $50 to $70 or more a pop for one. For one. And it's crazy. But now you're also seeing a lot of duplicate companies coming out with their own versions.
Yeah.
But no, Koiki from Hide Up was the ones that kind of introduced that, and you cannot get those anywhere. I don't know for sure what.
I'm pretty sure if I go to the local grocery store and I have some quarters and I go to the gumball machine, I am sure that there's something like that. Like
Absolutely.
my kids definitely have pool toys that look somewhat like that I know
So
we could
true.
like
Give a shot.
Well,
super
we
glue
throw
onto a hook.
We throw jigs with skirts on, whatnot. I mean, it just has to be something that they
Yeah.
haven't seen, and it's been a huge craze this year.
Okay,
and,
so that's hot. Then the dice bait. Let's see that, Chris.
dice
Pull up
baits are going to be a little bit smaller,
Walk me
but
through
the
dice
fuzzy
bait.
dice. Now, when I've used fuzzy dice before, definitely on smallmouth, it's a very small bait, more for drop shotting.
Okay.
That's when I've seen it used the most.
Okay.
Drop shot, and guys will replace like their flatworms,
Okay.
or their robo worms,
Yeah.
or their whatnot.
that style.
with a little half cube.
That's it. That's what it looks like.
That's it.
I've never even seen one.
And you'll see guys
A dice
catching
bait.
trophy smallmouth using this dice bait
On a drop shot.
On a drop shot.
That is wild.
See, that's why I kind of question the bass world, Chris.
Yeah, it's strange.
I think that's
It's
why I
different.
stick to being a
this,
walleye
this
guy.
whole conversation though reminds me of like when we're on the boat fishing flies and you get like the sandpaper out or the pliers and you're trying to like make yours look like absolute hell.
Yep, and
what are
they
you
eat
doing?
it, and
It's like a $4 fly.
And they
It's
eat
just because it's
And that's what
different.
guys are doing now. They'll take a piece of soft plastic and they'll thread their own strands through there, make their own. But they're heavy salted.
Yeah.
So that was a big craze 2 years ago, but you've seen that now evolve to that urchin bait. But you'll see guys still throwing those dice bait. Yeah.
That's crazy. All right, so as we talk trends, what's next?
It's hard to get away from the forward-facing sonar side of things for us. What we're seeing and continue to see is more baits falling under that trend of hovering, strolling, jig and minnow
Be able
bites.
to put it right in front of
Just be
them.
able to put it and being able to hold it there. Whether or not that bait, what I've been messing with more are soft plastic baits that either have a wings to them or not. And what that means is they'll have like little wings right behind their eyes that stick out that help them displace water. So it'll help you hover the bait over them longer. And now it's jig heads and hooks. Messing around with different jig head and hooks to get that better return on your forward-facing sonar to where you can bomb it out 100 plus feet. You're watching your bait go down. That trend continues to be the top for us right now. I just spent $600 on 2 boxes of jig head hooks that were custom made for me from a guy in New York, Joe LaBarbera, from the Outer Realm. That are specifically designed for what size plastics you're throwing with. And these are going to be designed for more in that 5 to 6 inch Sakamana shad or baits like that. And what you want to do with that is you want to find a jig head that you can help swim and hover those baits over and keep them in front of those fish the best possible. That's the biggest trend I would say for us still right now. And out of the 75 to 80% of guys that do run probably forward-facing sonar in our clubs and in our stuff, 10 to 15% of them know how to use it.
Yeah.
So as they continue active target the new XL, I haven't even started messing with that yet. I'm still still tweak in my active target too from last year. So a lot of guys are trying to stay with that trend of the new electronics coming out. Guys, you talk about running multiple graphs. Some guys running 12-inch screens or more on their kayaks. Getting that side dialed in, I would say, is still the number one thing you want to get dialed in, because if you don't, you're going to get beat by it.
I mean, that's just it. And we talk about this all the time. Like, you don't have to jump into this world of forward-facing and that, because it's a big controversy. You're either for it or you're against it. There's not a whole lot of medium ground. And it has changed it, right? I mean, even on guide trips, right? Like, if I have a crew that wants to use it, I mean, you're dedicated to it, but there's no doubt we're catching more and bigger fish. I mean, it's not even like a few. It is night and day different, more fish, bigger fish when we're using it. So it's changed everything. But you just have to decide if that's what you want to make the day or not. You know, right? So you don't have to use it. Just know that, if you do choose that. But I agree. We had a great podcast with Robert Blosser about this same thing, about how you look back several years and all we were doing was creating better baits, almost like your glide baits and these big swim baits, right? It was better photo finish. It was better rattles. It was better baits. Forward facing is actually taking us back, because we're realizing now, if you can put it right on their nose and hold it there, a fish will eat a lot of things that normally they might not have. Exactly. It's a bait that they would never swim to, but if it's laying on their nose, it's catching. As a walleye guy, when I used to use a lot of different tackle, I'm guiding tomorrow, I will throw a jig head and a half a crawler. Old school basics. And I'm throwing that 90% of the time, because now I realize if I throw it on their head, it used to be a tactic we'd use for little fish, young males, and now we're using that for our 30-inch fish, because if we put it on their head, they eat it.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And we're running just, taking a crawler, putting air in it, throwing it on a light jig head, just so it falls slower, like you're talking about, and it catches fish.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, with the forward facing, is that the trend? I agree. If you put it in their face, your odds of catching that fish go drastically up with whatever you use. And then you put in the right color, the right scent, the right whatever, your odds only go up.
It's just not a plug and play. You plug it in and you start catching fish.
No.
That's the one thing about it. It has taught me so much about fish just behavior.
Activity and movement.
How many fish won't bite your bait? How many of them come up and what they call swerve your bait, where that's where they'll come up, and you swear they're going to bite it, and then right when they get to that bait, they swerve away. But it teaches you so much. It also teaches you your casting distance.
Oh yeah.
What your bait does in the water. How far, like you said, your sink ratios. You can learn all that from your screen. Do you need it to compete? No. Should you have it? So there is that dividing. It does make you a better angler. It does help you cover water quicker. It helps you, stay on fish that are active or not. But you look at the tournament last weekend at Chatfield. Top 3 guys. 2 out of the top 3, they know how to use forward-facing sonar very well. The winner did not use it. Second place did use it a little bit. Third place doesn't even have it on his yak.
Okay.
So essentially, no, you don't need it to compete, but it will help you tremendous.
Yeah.
And you will put more fish in the boat by having it.
Yeah.
And you're seeing the thing is that some people do think they can't compete without it, and it's a huge investment to drop that much money on all that live stuff. And then if you're going to drop that much money on that, you need to be on the water as much as possible learning it. Like I said, it's just not a plug and play and you plug it in and fish are jumping in your boat. You got to learn how to use it. And for us, that's a little bit different on the kayak side, and you're familiar with this. We have to control our forward-facing sonar with our hand on a pole.
Yep.
So where you have guys on the boats that can do it with their feet and be very proficient at dialing in and throwing to fish, we have to essentially take a hand and move our active target, our live sonar, to keep up with those fish, then make your cast and manipulate your bait down there while also trying to manipulate that pole. It makes it a little bit tough of a learning curve to get that dialed in. Once you get it dialed in and you get comfortable, then it starts to get fun.
Yeah.
But you do need to, time on the water is everything, and that's not just for electronics, that's for anything.
Yeah.
And you know that better than anybody. But yeah, the trend still for us in the kayak world is the electronics. what's been really cool now is to incorporate both my big baits now with my electronics. Watching the pull power of a big glide bait on your forward-facing sonar when you pull a whole school up is pretty incredible. That's pretty cool to watch. So I would say that would,
yeah. All right, so question about this, and we talked to Isaac Hatch, and he was the first one that really brought up the line topic, right? And this is something that I wanted to get your take on, because you follow trends, right? So if anybody knows things about current trends, you, and we're actually going to dive into this, we're going to talk to the guys at Berkeley about it, but when we talk about line, right, you now have forward-facing line, right, which is castability, to make accurate casts, things like that. But one, when you're throwing a very expensive bait, what line you throwing, and you can talk about anything. And two, how many anglers? So a bait, let's say a jig head, the bulkier and squaredness is going to get a better return on your graph, right? So we're definitely developing that. Obviously, a lightweight bait, you talked about wings on a plastic, fall slower. How many guys are way oversizing their line to prevent the line from falling fast? Walk me through that. Walk me through what line you're using, but more so, are guys using line weight as a trend?
Yes, absolutely. Now, for me, we'll start with big baits. Big baits, I'm a Seagar Tatsu guy.
Okay.
I won't throw anything smaller than 15 pound up to 25, just depending on what I'm throwing. My smaller 1 ounce baits, glides and stuff are down on that 15 in. My big stuff, my 5-6 ounce stuff is going to go on that 25 pound.
I don't know if I'd feel comfortable with 25 pound. I was shark fishing this weekend. I was running 200 pound hollow core, and I couldn't break it. So we had 3 guys where we could break that. If I was throwing a 5-6 ounce, very expensive swim bait, I'm pretty sure I'd be running 200.
Probably
we throw 3 ounce surf casting, and it's just the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
Probably, be real careful. Okay, that. But actually, so you're going to go back on different line diameters. I actually started messing around with sinking braid.
Okay.
So what that is for a lot of my smaller spinning setups where I'm throwing smaller swim baits or smaller stuff, it's always braid to leader for me and a lot of other guys. It's a braid to leader. Depending on what you're throwing. This year and last year, I started messing around with sinking braid. And what sinking braid allows is it allows your line to fall straighter, so you're getting down to the fish quicker, setting the hook better. You don't have the bow in your line. But when you're talking about your leader line, that's where you're going to go, manipulate your fall rates and stuff. So yeah, if I want to get down there, I'll drop clear down to 6 pound test Tatsu to throw really finesse swim baits, clear water, get them down fast. But if I'm a little bit dirtier water, bigger baits, you'll line up, get it to fall slower. So it just kind of, and then you go to topwater. That's a whole different thing. I'll throw a mono leader on for topwater or something, So, but this year for me is going to be more of the sinking braid. The sensitivity is so much better. The problem is when you're messing with sinking braid, the test strength is different than what you're used to on your fluoros or whatnot. So you really want to be careful when you're picking out. You'll break off a lot of stuff.
So it's thinner.
It's very thin, and you really have to mess with it before you get comfortable with it. And it's not cheap. It's not cheap either. So, but that's going on more of your small swim baits and stuff like that. And then, once I get to all the way up to flipping and stuff, if I'm flipping timber or something like that, I'll go up to 20 pound. And, but I'm a braid guy too. So as we get into the summertime and we start throwing more stuff into the summer, I'll stay straight braid though too.
Straight braid.
I'll stay straight braid. No,
I don't know if I've ever thrown straight braids.
And a lot of times that is because we're not fishing as much in Colorado. We'll be out of state. We'll be fishing a lot more vegetation. We'll be fishing a lot more frogs and topwater stuff. Plus you're dealing with bigger fish a lot of times too. You want to be able to pull them out of stuff. So I'll go straight braid too.
I love that.
It's
I would love to have the confidence to do that. I would feel powerful.
It does sound cool too when you lock one up really good on braid in the grass or something.
Yeah.
You get that
So we were talking to Isaac about it in the walleye world, and what he was talking. So, right, in a jigging situation for walleye, right, throwing out a jig of whatever kind, hitting bottom. Our strike zone was as that bait comes up to a foot, 18 inches, and then falls back down. And he was like, on a longer cast, when you hop it, the bait is coming forward so drastically that you're burning through the fish. Let's say they're on a ledge or on a small hump. So he goes, in a normal scenario jigging where I would run 10-pound, braid, fusion, super line, whatever the case. He goes, my normal go-to was 10. He goes, in these cases, I'll go to 30 with a real bulky line. He goes, so I get such a bow, anti of what you're talking about. He goes, when I hop the jig goes up vertically. So he goes, I go, only 20% forward,
right?
But I go up and then it falls back down. So his was like, my strike zone is better. I am going up and down vertically more. I'm going forward less. So I'm staying in the fish longer, and he's catching a pile of fish. And I'm like, man, I don't think about that often. You know what I mean? Like I run, my certain jigging lines, but I'm not getting that much vertical, and I just not something I dealt with. And I all of a sudden when I played with it, right? So I put on 25 on one, and I'm throwing like a quarter ounce jig on a 25-pound, heavier braid. And when I did that with on my forward facing, my line was really hanging in the water column, but I had such a nicer fall.
Sure.
I was staying in the strike zone longer.
Sure.
And I was like, man, this is one of those things that, like, why aren't guys throwing 60-pound braids and things like this to literally hover your bait in the water column?
That's a good point. And to go back on the forward-facing sonar side, jig fishing, that's when you'll show yourself on the screen how fast you're fishing fast. I mean, you're hopping a jig, through that area, and you watch it on your screen how fast you're actually covering that. Even on a slower reel, or if you drop down into gear size. That's one thing about watching that screen also that'll help you, and changing your line would be very beneficial. And watching it on the screen is you're watching that bait and what it's doing there in real time, and you can see yourself moving too fast. So I mean, the ideal is there's two parts to it. You want that bait around that fish as much as possible, but there's also that little bit where you don't want him looking at it near as much too long, So so you'll see a lot of guys creating a lot of action in their baits. You'll see this on the elites a lot. They're creating a ton of action in their bait, but they're not reeling the bait in, and you'll watch that, and they're keeping the action going, but they're not covering the ground like you're talking. Now, that could be something to look into, maybe, with those guys. What's the pound test they're using on that to keep that hovering? That's a good point that you brought up.
And that's it. And that's where I'm back and forth, right? So let's just say I'm scanning, doesn't matter the species, bass, walleye, whatever, and I see it on forward facing. Fish move so much faster. That's the first thing that forward facing's taught us, right? Like, I always use this example. Back in the day, as a walleye guide, I would drive over hump with my 2D sonar. I'd see 6 walleye in the graph. I would lower my bow mount. I would drop it in, turn around, hit spot lock or whatever, and then I would cast. And in my head, I'm like, there's 4 walleye sitting there, right? Now, forward facing, you're like 18 seconds and they're gone. We just didn't know these things.
Right.
But with forward facing, half of the time I'm like, I need my bait to sink so fast, so I'm running thin diameter line.
Get it down.
I'm running heavyweight to get to them before they move. But then when it gets to them, I might get one hop of that bigger jig, and it's going to fall past them, and I just hope they commit and chase with it. Or I hope I can swim it and they follow it, and I hope I get commitment. But there's times I don't. Then I throw out the heavier braid, and it just sits in their face. It falls so slow. If the fish are moving fast, I don't get them. So you have to watch them for a second. You're like, all right, they're moving here. Let's lead them like we're shooting a goose. And so you lead them, you get to them, and it works. So very opposite perspectives of get to the bait fast, get it in their face, or the big, slow sink, heavy line that just hovers in their face. There's a time and a place for both, but that's where I love hearing your input on the trends.
You're right on, because that's why you have to keep multiple jig heads on your boat at different times for your sink rates, depending on how the fish are acting. If you need to get it down there quick, you need to get it down there quick. If they're being lethargic, like our tournament last week, those fish after that cold front, a lot of them moved back out deeper and hugged right to the bottom. they weren't coming up to a fast moving bait. You had to painfully move your bait as slow as possible and keep it off the bottom a good foot or two before those fish would commit to it. They were just being very, very finicky that day. But you have to have something in your arsenal to accommodate all three of those aspects, and you wouldn't know that without watching it. So it is beneficial there. You can just sit there and blind cast all day, but this helps you just get it dialed in. So it helps you get on that pattern so much quicker for the day. But no, that is something now after talking with you that I'll definitely mess with, is just that different line on the
It's crazy. After he mentioned it, I started playing with it. It was night and day of, again, and I mean, opposite of like the technology, right? Like you're looking at it and you're like, in every situation, I want a break strength or a pound strength versus my diameter, and I'm always playing those ratios. Now I'm like, like again, I do so much saltwater fishing now. I run a lot of hollow core just for strength on these big shark, and I'm like, that's what I want. I want that big, heavy floating, and it's crazy how my bait like almost gets hung up as I hit thermoclines. But man, if I can keep it in front of the fish, it's deadly.
Yeah, that's pretty
so
sweet.
So it's one of those things that after that conversation, I started playing with it, and it's blowing my mind how that heavier line it makes a difference.
Well, you brought up a good point too about leading fish. That's something too. That's a technique in itself. Is learning how to lead fish on your screen, depending on where they're swimming to. One thing that guys can always do is that left to right. They look on their screen in forward mode and they always see that left to right. But one thing that's become hard and you really need to take advantage of is watching the fish that are swimming to you and away from you. And those fish have a different return on the screen, and that's a hard one to get used to. But a lot of the times that those are fish you're missing out on throwing to because you're more looking at the left to right bite, and the ones that are out in front of you or whatnot.
What does that look like? Walk us through what a fish coming and going.
So a lot of times you'll get your brightness on your return from that fish moving, but when you get one that's moving away from, how do you explain that? It's a different return on your graph. How would you explain that? It takes enough time on the water to be around enough fish to see one that's actually swimming side to side versus swimming away from you.
You just don't get the profile. So I mean, like I'd say vertical bars. I mean, it's a very light.
It's a light change, like you said. But a lot of times when you drop on that light change, that fish will turn,
and then you see it.
Then you see it really good. But
that's a good point, though, because I agree. A lot of people miss those.
A lot of those fish are missed, and I still continue to miss those fish a lot of times. But I actually was taught that from an elite angler, Brandon Polinick, and on a trip to Idaho I took. He showed me what to look for on the screen, and I had been missing these fish the whole time, and it just opened up a whole new world of other fish to mess with. You get it locked into that zone of throwing at just the ones you're seeing in front of you or whatnot, which is good because it teaches you a lot too. But don't forget the ones that aren't pulling the best return that are there's still fish that are there.
I mean, that's it.
Yeah, they're there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I love that. All right, so a couple more questions here before we wrap it up. You have been on guided trips with the highest and elite bass anglers. You go to national championships, tournaments, all this kind of stuff. And again, you seek education, you seek information. We love helping anglers catch fish. Whether it's your knowledge or something that somebody's given you knowledge-wise, advice more. What's one of the biggest pieces of advice that you have been given or obtained that you think changes the game the most when it comes to catching fish?
I think I hit it just a little while ago, and I know you would contest to this, is time on the water.
Okay.
Don't matter if it's on the bank, don't matter if it's, in a belly boat, on a kayak, in a boat, in a big boat, on a guided trip. If you want to catch fish, you got to get on the water. You can watch all the YouTube videos you want. You can learn about all the techniques you want. But if you're not on the water, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And if anything, for me, my progression over the years has been just spending as much time on the water as possible. I have a unique schedule, which that opens up my summers, that allows me to be on the water pretty much as I want to be. And time on the water is everything. Getting familiar with your equipment, the water, the bodies of water you're fishing, the fish that you're fishing after.
Yep.
You want to be more successful, you don't sit around listening to us all day. You get out and you get on the water and you get after it. That would be my number one thing.
I agree with that. I mean, I think the other thing that, and I preached this a long time before the sonar, but the sonar's really amplified it, is I think the average angler overworks their presentation. And this is one of those things that for years, I have articles in Fisherman, and there's videos, there's so much stuff, right, where I used to preach shorter rods, especially in the walleye world, right, when we're jig fishing. Everybody is going to longer rods. The whole trend of the industry is longer rods. And I would be like, hey, I'm going to throw a 6-foot jigging rod for walleye. Everybody's like, man, but on a 7-footer, I can cast further. I get a better hook set, all these great things. And I'm like, man, even myself that is very conscious of it, when I run a 7-foot rod versus 6-foot rod, I overwork my bait so much. And this is before we had a lot of knowledge of it. It's just something that I saw, and I saw it more on guide trips because I was like, hey, hop that jig 3-4 inches, and I watched anglers do it, and they couldn't do it. And I'm like, hey, to work a jig, minimal, you're barely moving the rod.
Barely.
So we preached that. Then you brought on forward facing, and now you're like, holy cow, if I just gave a person a rod, the average guest of mine on a boat, average person, whoever, and I'm like, hey, take a few casts, and you watch their bait, and they're just burning it back in. They're talking, they're looking around, and they're reeling, and I'm like, dude, you're not even close. Then I'll consciously be like, hey, let's try to run this bait at 7 foot. This is where I want you have to reel slow. And the average person couldn't even do it. No. So that's one of the biggest things that I talk about, on this, and as we talk advice type thing, is that so many people don't want to cater to the fish. And I'd say the average situation, jerkbait guy is the worst guy, but all of them, everybody overworks the bait too fast. Absolutely. Power fishing, and it kind of brings it full circle back to where we started, where you were like, the kayak guys get it done when boat guys don't because they slow down.
Well, we talked about Leslie, your 2-time state champ. One of her favorite techniques is dead sticking. She just dead sticks a Ned rig, and she's got the patience to do it. That's why she's so good at what she does, and her techniques is because she fishes slow, thorough, very methodical in what she does, but she also does not incorporate a ton of action at all.
I don't own a Ned rig because I can't do it.
Ned rigs are tough. They are.
Like we talked to David Harrison, who is best friends with Ned, fishes with Ned 3 to 4 times a week. We did a podcast with him not too long ago. Like, I have ties to Ned, and I literally don't use one because, you see me, right? I can't sit still for this pod. I cast out, and David's like, all right, move the bait an inch, and we'll sit there for a little while. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I'm done. I'm bored.
I'm exactly the same.
I would have to put it in a rod holder and give me something else I can do.
But now you just hit on another thing. I just had a custom rod, a little plug for myself. I'm actually sponsored by Alpha Angler Rods out of Washington, and I just had a rod built for me called the G-Shake, and it goes now the opposite of what you're talking about. It's a 6'7".
Okay.
It's a forward-facing jig and minnow rod with a stinger tip. It's made to incorporate as much action as possible as you can do for your jig and minnow. Yeah. So now it's just technique specific too, and what you're saying, like jerkbait bite. During practice last week at Chatfield, my jerkbait bite was taking a 3 to 4 second pause before I was getting fish to commit. And like you said, the majority of people will never stay still long enough to, and that'll just go right by the fish. So no, you're right. We tend to, and like I said earlier, boats, we see it a lot, tend to fish fast, tend to hit a spot for 10 minutes and then they book it, and you can slide in a kayak behind there and pick up fish that they missed.
I had a jerkbait bite, get this, because I don't think I've ever told you this. This was years ago, but our bodies of water used to stay open later than they do now, right? We have all these crazy rules on boat inspections, and people that aren't from Colorado, right? Super governed and political on boating. We're told when we can launch and not launch, and either way, it was a late October, November bite for big pike, and it was a jerkbait bite, and it was like a 10 to 12 second pause. It was like the pike sit under a tip up. They would slide in and they would just stare at it and stare at it. So it was the situation to where combo situation to get anglers to slow down enough. We'd fish 2 rods. So I would give a guy 2 jerkbaits. You would cast one, reel it down depth, give it a hard slap, throw that slack down, and then put it in the rod holder, put it between your legs, hold it, whatever you want to do, cast the other one, twitch it. By the time you were doing 2, it was forcing anglers to slow down enough. And then 2, obviously, you had more baits out, so you were catching more fish. But if the bait didn't sit 10, 12, 15 seconds, you could not get a bite.
that crazy?
And if you give somebody a jerkbait rod and you're like, count 15 between it, they couldn't do
No
it.
way.
You either had to set a timer or you had to give them 2 rods. So I started with the 2 rods simply for a way to distract people. Ended up being this phenomenal technique that we worked.
Good.
I haven't had the lake stay open long enough for me to do that bite recently. But it was crazy. But it was one of those things that, like, little things. And I mean, we were catching like 10, 12, 40-inch fish a day. Like, it was
Doing that.
epic, you know. And it was one of those things that, if you didn't slow down.
Well, that kind of, and we hit on the glide baits. Watching the number one mistake, I've done it myself plenty of times, still continue to do it once in a while, but I see a lot of guys make, is they see the fish tracking your glide bait and they stop.
Yeah.
And they stop reeling, when actually you want to do the opposite.
Yeah.
You know, you want to get that fish away. However, we just talked about you sitting there on a 10, got this giant pike sitting under a jerkbait for 10 seconds. You just never know.
Yes,
and you wouldn't
it's very
know
situational.
if you weren't on the water doing
Yep.
it, right?
Yep.
So,
No,
I mean,
that's
goes back to learning these situations and getting familiar. Just goes back to just try to spend as much time, if this is what you want to do, try to spend as much time on the water as possible. And it's going to open up so many windows and avenues for you. And you're going to wind up having a technique that you're going to find that nobody else does. That's going to pay off for you. And you want to hold that to your chest, really good. And you don't want that out, especially in Colorado. And you, of anybody in this state, knows a good bite. You don't want to talk about it too much until you take as much advantage of it as possible, right? So, just going back, just get on the water. Anybody, just get on the water any way you can.
I mean, that's it. We talked about that lake trout thing we did the other day. We're talking about that exact thing because so many guys, they see a big fish commit and they, like, a lake trout bites so light when it's on plastic. So, like, you want to stop because you're like, I need to focus on feeling it. But everything that a lake trout swims next to freaks out, right? Predator-prey relationship, everything that most of our big predator fish approach, that prey, your bait, whatever,
Taking
it
off.
panics and takes off. So
Exactly.
a lot of times when you kill a bait, like, it's an immediate sign to that big fish, like, what is wrong here?
What happened?
Why is this not scared of me? Yes, I mean, everything's situational. So
There's a cool move you can do on a glide bait that's triggered more big bites than anything when you've stopped, and this is sometimes can help, is if you stopped and realized you stopped, is if you're good enough to do it, is if you can 180 your bait and turn around and almost hit that fish head to head.
Absolutely.
A lot of times that fish, when you turn around and those eyes come back around, that fish will blow up on there. But that takes time, and it takes getting comfortable and good with your bait too. You can't just do that. You got to go and spend some time
That's
with
it.
that and how to fish.
I mean, I was probably the worst jerkbait fisherman in the world until literally not too long ago. And I sat down with Bobby Blosser and Matt Inslee, who works for me. We went on a walleye jerkbait bite, and I'm working the bait, and they're like, "Hey, man, your bait's not turning." I'm like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "You got to throw most slack." So it was a challenge of taking any jerkbait, right, and getting that bait to at least turn broadside, right? So if your bait is twitch, it has to turn broadside. So the fish is following. If the bait doesn't turn broadside, you immediately. But if you can twitch the bait hard enough, and before that bait even gets done, if you can throw that rod and have enough stiff line to get that bait to roll even 60%, to roll it just back to where the fish, if that bait even remotely faces the fish, like you're saying, the triggering goes up by 90%. It's crazy. It's back to like Chase Bates muskie fishing, right? When we used to get a muskie follow in, instead of trying to pull that fish in and do a figure eight, we would just follow another bait. We'd immediately take the bait away, get that fish to return, and have a bait coming at them.
Right at them.
And I mean, they hit it every time type thing. So there's a lot of little tricks like that makes a big, but again, it's time on the water.
And also with that, you're talking about jerkbait fishing and just in general, trying to throw a jerkbait on a kayak versus standing up in a boat are two different deals. And that's another thing that one of the biggest learning curves once you get into your kayak and start fishing is getting comfortable casting and landing a fish while you're sitting down. Now, we do stand up a lot. We do, but more times than not, you are sitting down when you're fishing, and it's a whole different cadence.
Absolutely. It's everything.
So trying to land pulling back on a jig fish or running a jerkbait in a kayak, it takes some practice too. So you'll snag your coat and you'll hang stuff up. And
we're gonna get out and do this with Trevor, and you'll stand back on the boat, Chris, and you can video me falling in trying to handle this.
I love it.
The last time we went out together throwing jerkbaits, I had to almost reteach myself standing in your boat because I was used to being in the kayak. So yeah,
Standing up 8 foot in the air, it's great.
It's a different learning curve out of the yak to cast and wind too. Once again, time on the water. Yep. Time on the water.
All right, I know I asked you about current trends. It was forward-facing sonar. The last question of the day, looking back, the new trends, the old trends, the $1,000 swim baits, everything. You have to go catch a fish tomorrow. Take away the sonar. That's not an option. What's your go-to approach? Like one thing.
If we're going tomorrow bass fishing, this time of year, it's a chatterbait. Yeah, it's a vibrating jig. It's just hard not to not have one of those tied on right now, or actually all year for that matter. I mean, a chatterbait for bass, is always going to usually be a good one to have on. But particularly right now, I would, until we get into spawn and stuff, I'd have a chatterbait tied on.
I love it. Chatterbait's one of those things that I want to like more. I carry them in my boat every day. I've never, ever fishing for bass. We catch pike on chatterbaits. We catch Lakers on chatterbaits. We catch a ton of walleye. We pull chatterbaits on lead core for walleye, and they pile on it. So we love it. But it's one of those things that I want to work in more situations, and it doesn't. Because when I look at it, I'm like, it looks good. It sounds good. My rod, like when I feel it in my boat, I'm like, this is amazing. And I always want the fish to like them more, and they don't. But I don't fish them traditional.
Well, I took 2 years ago. We took that trip to the Yukon on that lake trout trip, and that's all I took was 1.25 ounce chatterbaits. They didn't even know what they were at the lodge. Yeah. I can't tell you how many, and I'm not joking here, how many hundreds of fish in that week I caught on those chatterbaits. They're phenomenal.
It's
baits.
flashy, it vibrates. It's got everything you look for.
When they're hungry, they'll eat them. And the good thing about it is, like, if you don't have a graph and you just want to run bank, I don't know. It's just like a crank, but you can pull it through a lot more. They don't like wood, so you don't want to stick around too much wood with them. But they're a lot of people like to fish them because they like feeling that vibration the whole time and that bite. But it is a great bait. Early spring, running bank, trying to get some pre-spawners, trying to get a couple good fish in the boat.
It does cover water well.
It does cover water well. The guy who finished third at Chatfield last week, he was throwing a chatterbait. So they will get bit. And if I couldn't go out and mess with my jig and minnow, which always is fun to do, then I would say I'd throw a chatterbait on now and go run some banks, definitely in ponds and stuff right now, and go with that. And then here in the spawn here in the next couple of weeks, then that's when you get really easy. You can just throw a little Cinco on and go mess around or something if you want. But
I love it. All right, guys, that is the bulk of the context what we wanted to cover today. Kayaks fishing, trends, where the market's heading. And again, you're going to hear a lot more from with us. But again, this is Trev Stuckey talking about everything. He is engulfed into it, right? If somebody catches a fish on something crazy tomorrow, you'll hear about 20 minutes later from Trev because he's on top of it. So we love that. So Trev, thank you for coming on today, man.
I had a blast. Thank you so much, Nate.
Again, any sponsors you need to shout out to? Anybody?
Alpha Angler. That's my rod sponsor. My bait sponsor is Battle Baits out of Missouri. And then Rhino Originals. If you're looking for any European or fish mounts or any kind of mounts, Rhino Originals out of Nebraska.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's it,
awesome,
buddy.
Man. I have it.
Cool.
Again, guys, Chris is behind the studio running everything there. Huge thanks to him. I'm Nate Zielinski. This is the Source Podcast brought to you by Jiffy Ice Fishing. Again, you keep hearing it, but make sure you check out Jiffy Ice Fishing. Also, make sure you follow all the Jiffy socials. We do a ton of stuff on that. Going to have a lot of education for you. So again, just check out all things Jiffy Ice Fishing. We'll see you next time.